Hi, my name's Ali Hadji-Heshmati, and you're watching the Permanent Rain Press.
Hi everyone, it's Chloe with the Permanent Rain Press. Today I am excited to be joined by Ali Hadji-Heshmati. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for pronouncing my name so well as well, actually, because I know it's a hard one.
I did ask your publicist ahead of time. I want to make sure
Fair
that
enough.
I get it right. But
No, I appreciate that.
of course, I mean, you've been so busy as of late. Two new projects that we have to discuss. But before that, I did want to cycle back a bit because your acting journey, while it began at age 12, you've had a love for the arts since a young age. So tell me about that early passion and who or what inspired you.
I'd say I just remember being really obsessive about a lot of films. I remember watching films like Chicken Run and pretty much any Pixar film before the first Cars movie over and over and over. And I then remember actually watching a school play, um, and I watched the actors on stage, and then I saw the actors coming off the stage out of their characters and out of the theatre. And I was so unusually shocked by how different they were. And I was so invested in the play that I didn't quite realize that they actually just were students and not their characters. And I thought that almost the unusualness of that has always kind of stuck with me, how for me, they became completely different people.
Culture shock. Hey, you see them walking out onto the street, you could potentially go up and talk to them. You're like, what's going on here?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I kind of saw them as like, I saw them in a heroic light, whereas I think they probably looked at me like a younger student. Like, what is this kid, this 10-year-old kid doing? But I just found it really, really unusual. And it has always stuck with me.
Your first taste of acting was a school play. So which was that one for you?
My first school play, um, I think it was Bugsy Malone. Yeah. And that was a lot of fun. Yeah.
So fast forward to today, you do study English literature part-time at Oxford. Was it important for you to further your education at university?
I I probably wouldn't say important. I'd say more it was just something that I really wanted to do and something that I usually find quite entertaining. So it was just something that I really enjoy. And whether it's important or not is something I think more complicated that I'm not too sure of.
What do you enjoy about reading and your studies? Because I know it's a lot of research, it's a lot of asking questions, analyzing. Is that something that you've always kind of been curious about growing up and through your younger years at school?
For sure. I think, I don't come from like a family of artists. I come from a family of people who are quite analytical or mathematical. Um, and I've always been fascinated about the kind of hidden technicality within, I don't know, a work of literature or films. Um, so it's almost like I really enjoy studying literature from that perspective of almost like it's a science rather than an art.
Do you have heated discussions in class or during reading groups?
No, we just have really, we just, I really enjoy the discussions we have. It's probably my favorite thing about the course. It never, you know what, funny, I don't think it ever gets heated. It probably, people can get really passionate, but um, no one's really no one really identifies with the opinion that they hold. It's more impersonal than that.
Yeah, I think that's great. And you're also getting to learn different perspectives at the same time, which can only help you in life and even as an artist. Let's talk about Bad Education because that just dropped. You can be seen as Warren in series 4. What can you share about your character in this new group of misfit students?
Well, Warren was first described to me as an old man trapped in a schoolboy's body. And I think that is a very, very fitting description because he is so unusual. I mean, Leighton Williams, who plays Stephen Carmichael in the series, he has a line, "Warren, you odd little man." And that's something that was constantly quoted to me on set. But Bad Education was so much fun, and Warren's unusualness was so much fun to play with, particularly with the extreme and crazy range of characters that he has around with, and being able to play with the rest of the cast, with this kind of clash of characters was so much fun.
What did you learn by working with series veterans Charlie Burnham and Leighton Williams? And Leighton, of course, was also in the writer's room this past season.
You know, I mean, I just want to say so much because that is the truthful answer. But to give you kind of a specific example, I would say, okay, so I'd say one thing is just, I think they're both so unbelievably talented that when you are fortunate enough to get to work with people as talented as they are, you occasionally get to pick up tricks and, I don't know, brilliant things they use to play their roles. But also I'd say the biggest thing for me that I admire about both of them is they were just amazing leaders. They always make sure everyone in the cast is okay. They always set the bar of how to lead by example. And I think throughout the entire shoot, they didn't complain once. They always had such a brilliant work ethic. And the way they go about it is infectious. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why we had so much fun on that shoot, because they created this really lovely environment from the top. And they're probably watching this and thinking I'm such a wanker, to be honest. I'm sorry to use that word, but that's yeah.
That's so nice to hear. And, having those figures on set, especially in like such a big production, it makes all the difference for actors like yourself. And, you might be in that same role one day. So it's nice to have those people to look up to. Did you get to meet creator, producer Jack Whitehall at all?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, Jack was obviously in the reunion episode. And also obviously he's the executive producer, and I believe he also wrote the reunion episode. So yeah, it was fun and slightly surreal to see Jack come back with the rest of the original Class K, because I was a big fan of the original series. So to then be working with them was something quite unusual that I couldn't quite get my head around. But it was so much fun.
Yeah, because it had been 7.5 years since that film, and then there were the 3 series prior to that. So fans will definitely be reintroduced to both familiar and new faces. So why would you encourage people to tune in, especially since this is also like a new generation of the Class K students?
Yeah. I'd say it is a lot of fun. It's very silly. There's joke after joke. And if you want something that will just hopefully make you laugh and doesn't take itself too seriously and just genuinely has a lot of fun, then I think it's a show for you. And I think I'm obviously biased, but I think the Class K, so Fran, Asher, Bobby, Anthony, and Laura, I think they're absolutely amazing. They play the rest of Class K, and I really think they're worth a watch.
Did it feel very much like summer school vibes on set every day?
It did. Well, you know what? In our kind of base where we had our trailers, we were in this football field, and yeah, we had so much fun. Honestly, we would play football every lunch. We would always have lunch together. Yeah, it did feel like a summer school, to be honest. Yeah.
What makes you most proud to be a part of the Bad Education family?
That's a good question. I'd say just the result of it. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I'm proud of everyone's performance, and I think it's a really fun show that has a lot of very relevant jokes. And I hope people enjoy it and it resonates with people.
Well, people can tune in now. All episodes are on BBC iPlayer, and I think it's
Yeah.
also airing on BBC Three in the UK, so make sure to check that out. Now let's talk about Lockwood Co. on Netflix. Can you take me through your audition process?
Oh wow. Would you like the whole thing? The whole
I want a step-by-step account what you
Okay,
did every
wow.
day
So
leading up to. No,
I
just like who did you read for? You know, what dialogue did you get to read? Maybe just some of like when you responded to the casting call, what did you know?
Okay, yeah. So I remember I was actually filming on Holby and I got an email come through with the project, and the three scenes that I got sent was a scene where George and Lucy are arguing, a scene where George is debriefing the other two about a place they're going to hunt ghosts in, and a scene in episode 8, which is a bit darker. And I sent them off, and then it all just happened quite quickly. I mean, the next thing I knew, I met Carmel, our casting director, and Naira Park, one of our executive producers. And then I met Joe Cornish, who directed episodes 1 and 8 and wrote them as well. And then I met Ruby and another boy who was up for Lockwood, and we did screen tests in Shepperton Studios. But that didn't quite work out. So then they got Cameron in, and us three really got on, and then we got cast. I think it was about 10 auditions in total over the course of, I taped for it in January and got the role in May. So yeah.
Quite the exciting process for you. Would you say you were confident going through the audition process, or did
No,
you?
not at all. No, I mean, when I got sent the project through, I first saw that it was being done by Joe Cornish, Nairo Park, and Rachel Pryor. And obviously, like, I'm such a fan of Attack the Block and Shaun of the Dead and all of the films they've done with Edgar Wright. And then I read the script because they also sent me episode 1, and I had never been up for anything like it. So it really meant a lot for me. And I think I put a lot of pressure on myself because I had never had the fortune of being up for a role as interesting as George.
Well, it all worked out for you, and I'm glad that you can kind of celebrate it with everyone and your team. What kind of research or preparation did you do for your character? Like, what kinds of discussions did you have with Joe and your directors about not only your portrayal, but George's backstory and who he is?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say the first thing was George is an expert on this world. So I had to be an expert on this world. So I read all the books and I had a lot of conversations with Rachel Pryor, one of our executive producers, about, okay, what is going on in this world? What is a lurker? What is a type 1? What is a type 2? How do they fight these ghosts? Me, Cameron, and Ruby actually have like a Quizlet, like flashcards to connect kind of Lockwood Co terms with the definitions, just so we could actually understand it. And then after I began to gain an understanding about what the world was, then it was trying to work out who the hell George was, because he is really unusual. And I think the task was making someone who is quite usual for me. And it was really, the things that really helped me were just a lot of conversations, particularly with Naira, Rachel, and Joe. I remember one conversation with Joe Cornish where he said that I asked him, is George more of a geek or a nerd? And he said, George is the type of person who would stay up late and watch Evil Dead 1, Evil Dead 2, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the Halloween films. And for some reason, I remember that really resonating with me and thinking, okay, that for me, that was a big step in understanding who George was.
And it kind of gives you a point, like you said, to kind of go off of and also build around that. Like, did you have freedom in that sense as well?
For sure. But I always made it my task to start it with the books and the script. And anything that informed any decisions about my character had to come from there, because one thing that I really wanted to honor and respect was the George that we see in the books, because of how much he means to so many fans. So I really tried to do my best to capture the essence of that George that we see in Jonathan Stroud's books.
And it's such a clever way of writing as well. Those books, of course, starting with The Screaming Staircase. Do you think that George, has a relationship or any connection with his birth family? That's something that I was curious about watching the show, and he does reference them briefly, but he's been away for around a year.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. George, like the three of them, doesn't quite fit in with his family in some, well, none of them really have a strong family relationship. And with George in particular, he just always felt like, I guess, the odd one out in his family and the weird one. I don't think it's anything too dramatic or serious. But I think when he thinks of home, he thinks of 35 Portland Road with Lockwood.
You've also said music helped you get into character. So what can you tell me about these pretentious playlists that you curated and what kind of music we can find on them?
Yeah, so so I remember I had the first place I made was just the general mood for the character, and it was just filled with, I think, the Social Network soundtrack. And then as the shoot went on, I think there was a lot of music by Raymond Scott, particularly Portofino 1 and Portofino 2. For some reason, I really related them to George, and I would always listen to them every morning before a shoot day. Yeah, I'd say those two songs in particular would definitely be on the pretentious playlists.
No Beatles, right? The Beatles is an artist that you listen to, but you kind of had to put that aside for getting into George.
Yeah, no, Beatles was like an end of the day song. Like I'd listen to, I don't know, I've Got a Feeling or Two of Us.
Yeah, after rap, you'd be like, I need to cool down a little.
Yeah.
So we know that George was fired from Fitz agency. How do you imagine he ended up meeting Anthony and ended up at Lockwood Co?
This was a question that we discussed actually, me and Cameron, and we had a few theories. I think the theory that we kind of settled on was when George got fired from Fitz, Lockwood, who was trying to build his agency, must have reached out to him and said, listen, you're a researcher, I need a researcher. My agency doesn't have the regulations and rules that Fitz has. You'll have a lot more freedom here, which would have definitely spoken to George. And then George accepted the job because he really liked the idea of not working under strict rules and maybe a kind of ownership that he doesn't quite trust. And then I think from then on, when George accepted the job, they became really good friends and really got on well.
I like have this picture in my head that he was like kind of just standing discreetly outside Fitz agency, just seeing like people come and go, and then seeing George, maybe George with the skull.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm wondering how he actually smuggled that thing out, because as we see, it's pretty sizable.
This is a good question. I mean, you raise a good point. I'd say, I mean, George also has a big puffer jacket, so I reckon he probably snuck it in there. But I also like what you're saying about Lockwood standing outside Fitz and it maybe being like the beginning of a cheesy rom-com film. Like George.
I know, just the two of them, right? We need the backstory, really, in some kind of flashback.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
I love watching also George and Lucy's relationship really grow throughout the season. Did you and Ruby also discuss your characters' interactions?
We did. We spoke about it a lot, especially in terms of, because obviously the series, it wasn't shot chronologically, and actually in the first 2 months we shot episodes 1 and 8 like smashed up together without doing any of, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So a lot of the conversations that we were having were, okay, where is their relationship now? Like, are they best mates? Do they hate each other? What is going on? So a lot of it was just, trying to map out what's going on here.
Yeah, really finding that place in the story, because like I can't believe you shot 1 and 8 like back to back, because it's kind of like, you're going from the start of the relationship to the end, and everything in between you haven't gone through yet. Where do you think his early kind of hostility and contempt towards Lucy came from, starting from that initial interview?
I think George really enjoys what he had with Lockwood and just the two of them. And I think the idea of someone coming in, threatening this kind of comfortable home that he's made for himself, like he finds quite intimidating. I think it's also the thing of George knows that Lockwood is reckless, and Lockwood would probably show off in front of a new person. And George doesn't want that. So yeah, I think it's just ultimately this new person, Lucy, was threatening the safety and the kind of certainty about what Lockwood Co was for him.
Definitely a bit of jealousy then, you would say. A lot of jealousy. I'd say,
as the season develops, I'd say it probably turns into jealousy as he notices that Lockwood and Lucy become closer, and almost closer than he is to either of them. And I think he begins to feel a bit left out.
It was funny, an episode, or it was the interview. This is a deep armchair. Takes a while to get up. I would say he definitely also can maybe sense that Lucy's a lot more talented than him, maybe in these one-on-one confrontations.
For sure, yeah. I mean, Lucy is someone who's so direct and fierce. So I think it's a matchup that George probably loses 9 times out of 10.
Which was your favorite scene to be a part of, and why?
So, okay, I'll give you, there's kind of 2 parts. There's one scene, one type of scene that I really enjoy is just Lucy, Lockwood, and George just kind of having a chat. So like there's a scene in the middle of episode 4 where they're really kind of all going at each other in Portland Row, and scenes like that where it's just the 3 of us working together, I think we all really enjoyed. And it really was such a pleasure kind of navigating how to go about the scene with them, because Cameron and Ruby, and they won't like me saying this, but they treat scenes like a team. They go into the room and they think, okay, how can we all make this scene the best for all of us? So I really enjoyed the scenes with them. And also the second kind of, I don't know, thing that I really enjoyed was scenes where you just look around and you're like, where the fuck am I? Like, what am I doing? Like, so that would be the scenes like on the Thames, which we shot, the scenes where we're riding in a really cool car in episode 3. But yeah, probably particularly just the scenes on the Thames where we'd be in a boat at, I don't know, 2 a.m. I really enjoyed them.
So I did want to talk about a few other memorable moments, scenes, anything you can share, really. Trousers are for wimps. How did you feel about George's freedom of clothing choice, or maybe his lack of clothing?
It was really liberating. It was honest, like I was walking around set on my first like big job in underpants and like a dressing gown, and it was great, to be honest. I loved filming Trousers Are for Wimps because everyone in the crew was so kind of, we became so close with everyone in the crew that they were all so funny about it and just created a really nice atmosphere. for an atmosphere that maybe could have been uncomfortable, but it was completely the opposite.
And special shout out to his apple apron for stress cleaning. That was also like, he had some like a quirky, it adds to his quirkiness. I love the little like elements they gave him. Even with the shirts you got to wear, it's like very comic book inspired.
Oh, I'm glad. Thank you. Yeah, no, stress cleaning was so much fun to film. I remember everyone in the crew and myself just found, and Ruby, we found it so much fun to film. It was like at the end of the day and we were all just laughing because it's so unusual.
We won't be seeing you doing that anytime soon in your personal life.
Stress cleaning. No, I mean, I'm looking around. My place is quite messy right now. But,
You're like, I don't want to touch it. Yeah. Coombe Carey Hall episode 3. Tell me about that set.
So that was, most of that was shot in Mentmore Towers, which I believe is Wayne Manor in Batman Begins. And it was crazy. It was so crazy. Like, sorry, I mean, I remember we turned up initially on the first day and it's literally a castle. And they had dusted it all down and made it really like kind of spooky. And particularly with sets like that, I find it makes actually our job so much easier because there's so much atmosphere already that we don't need to do as much to add to the atmosphere.
When you saw like the final cut in that room with the blood, did that alarm you?
In the final, when I saw the episode, yeah, because I mean, when we were doing that scene, we shot that in Ealing, and when we were doing that scene, we were literally just looking at like tennis balls, and no, seriously, like I had no idea what it would look like, and I'm so impressed about how it turned out, and a really big shout out to the VFX team because I think it's a really special scene, and it's one for me that really stands out in terms of the visual effects and how impressive they are.
And I think everything that the team does, the VFX team, like with all the ghosts and, you know, the death glows and the spirits that come up, they did such a great job with it. Episode 4, with George sharing his theory on Edmund Bickerstaff, you really got to shine. Tell me about like how fun was that piece of dialogue to perform?
Yeah, it was. That was such a fun scene because Will McGregor, he directed episodes 2, 3, and 4. He really just gave me a lot of freedom to just go in whatever direction I wanted. And particularly playing off Paddy, who is so funny. It was so much fun to just kind of tease him and play off his, I don't know, his mockery. But yeah, I think it's such a great moment for George, and it was so much fun to play.
Watching Patty and Jack and how like shocked and annoyed their faces looked after George's like, oh, he just like upped him again. Yeah, I thought that was like such a memorable scene for the season. In episode 8, Lucy kind of sacrificing herself for George in the bunker. Take me through that whole like emotional sequence, because like you mentioned, you filmed this early on, so you really had to find that place in the story where their relationship comes full circle.
Yeah, that was actually the first thing I filmed, funnily enough. Yeah, it was the first week and like kind of the big climax of the show. And I think, to be honest, and again, she probably won't like me saying this, but with Ruby, when you're acting against her and she is giving so much that it is really, really hard to just not give something in reaction to what she's giving. It's so real and really emotional that you just end up tearing up, and it really gets you. And obviously we had Louise and Jack in as well in that shoot who play Joplin and Kipps, and they were amazing as well. And I think whilst I was really anxious about the kind of how intense those scenes were, especially them being the first scenes, I think just the amazing actors I was working with at the time really put me at ease, and I could just bounce off what they were giving me.
Now, you had to reach some darker places throughout the season after George's brush with the mirror or the bone glass. So how did you get into that mental space, especially, in the middle episodes after that glance?
Yeah, I'd say, well, first, before anything, it was a task of actually understanding what the mirror was and what it did to George. And that was a lot of conversations with Rachel Pryor in particular. And I remember a lot of conversations with Joy Wilkinson, who wrote episodes 2, 5, and 6, and Catherine Morshead, who directed 5, 6, and 7. And I remember just trying to understand what it actually was, how it grew throughout, how the effects of it grew as the series went on. And then it was really just a case of trying to lay it all out. And I remember there'd be some scenes that we'd film where, I don't know, either Rachel or Catherine would be like, actually, I think, Ali, that's too much. I think that you're acting the effects of the mirror too much at this stage, and I think you need to dial it back. Or even later down the line saying, Ali, I think you need to dial it up. So we get a kind of trajectory of this almost insanity. But yeah, it was really tough, I'd say, for sure. And again, I'd say music was something that really helped me with it. But I have to give a lot of credit to Catherine Morshead, who always, as a director, which is really hard for a director because they're so busy on a set, always had time to just talk with me and guide me. And I think that's one of the most helpful things you can do, to really listen to an actor.
I'm sure getting that constant feedback, for you is something that's really invaluable, because it helps, you go through that process and you kind of find where you need to be. Which was your favorite scene as a viewer and why? So a scene that George was not in.
Okay, so I can spoil it. Yeah, so it's the scene. There's two scenes. It's the scene where Lucy and Lockwood have come out of the torture chamber after Winkman in episode 5. I just think Cameron and Ruby are incredible in that scene. I think Joe Cornish actually agreed with me. He thinks it's one of his favorite scenes as well. Because I think there's so much, it's so subtle, and so you kind of just see the pain in Cameron's eyes and you see the concern in Ruby's eyes, and it works so well for me. But also I'd say one of my favorite scenes is the rooftop fight in episode 7, with Luke Treadway, who plays the Golden Blade, and Cameron and Ruby. And I think maybe it's because I know how hard they worked on that and how much choreography they put into that, even during their shoot days, and tried to find time to rehearse it and choreograph it in like the cold of, I don't know, the nighttime in January. But it's really good. I mean, it's so intense and so well choreographed. Yeah, it's one of my favorite scenes in the show.
Yeah, the combat scenes were so dynamic, to watch. Were you disappointed that you didn't get some big combat scenes? Or were you like, I'll leave it to them?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I was just so kind of happy with the scenes that I had, because I really loved doing the stunts on the show. So particularly, the scene where George saves Kipps and the Annabelle Ward fight. There's something about when you're choreographing a stunt, there's so much teamwork involved, and also there's such a clear kind of objective. So maybe when you're anxious about the uncertainty of whether you'll get a performance or not, with a stunt, you kind of knew if you got it, because that it's more objective. And I always found comfort in that.
Yeah, and I think what sometimes people don't realize is how much, like you mentioned, choreography goes into this. And we see it like a split second sometimes on screen, but there's so much behind the scenes. So kudos to like the stunt team, stunt coordinators.
Sure.
Now for George, he's clearly aware, you briefly touched on this, Lockwood's own flaws, his impulsivity, his love of winning and being in the spotlight. Why do you think George tolerates it?
Wow, that's a great question. I'd say ultimately it's because Lockwood is someone who sees George for who he is, and George is someone who sees Lockwood for who he is. And for both of them, that's something that's really rare. They do have a deep connection and a deep friendship. They also do work well together, because in the sense that they're kind of opposites in how they believe a mission should be handled, but they usually, hopefully, compromise on that. And I think it's just that one thing that Joe would always reiterate in rehearsals, Joe Cornish, before we start the shoot, that these two are almost like brothers. They've lived with each other and worked with each other, and they really care for each other. And that's why George is so hostile to Lucy, because he's worried that it'll threaten this deep relationship that he has with Lockwood.
What's interesting is I feel like, and you kind of touch on it, George touches on it at the end. This is so touchy-feely, is, they don't have like that relationship where they're always hugging it out. It's more like you said, they kind of understand each other, give each other space, but also know what each other is good at on the field.
For sure. Yeah.
Tell me about George's relationship with Miss Joplin or Pamela. Like, why was he drawn to her, and what does he see her as?
Well, yeah, this is something that's slightly, I don't know. It's there's not really an objective answer, I don't think. Why he's drawn to her, first of all, I think is, first of all, George is in quite a dark place in episodes 4 and 5. He's just looked into the mirror, and Lockwood and Lucy are getting even closer and kind of leaving him out of things a bit. And then here comes this woman who sees him for who he is, who he can talk about academic things with. He can talk about, like, which is what he's really passionate about. And it's kind of that thing, he finds a friend when he feels like he's losing friends, and someone who really just respects him and sees him.
She definitely flatters him, and it always seems like she's there, when he needs her to
Yeah.
get into the library. I did see their relationship. It's funny because they had a couple of like these really close, like intense moments. But Louise Brealey is also a phenomenal actress, so I'm sure getting to kind of work opposite her and her wealth and experience was something.
Yeah, Louise is so amazing to work with, simply for the fact that you will go into the scene with her and she can take it in 5 different ways, and you don't know which way any of those 5 ways are going to be. I'd say George and Joplin's relationship is similar to my relationship with Louise, in that we really do get along, and she was such a pleasure to work with. I learned a lot from her, I'd say.
How early on, like, do you receive the scripts? Like when they first started, connecting over their kinship for knowledge, did you know that she was going to kind of be like the backstabber?
That was always the case. One thing, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but one thing that was always played with was how kind of romantic their relationship was. And that was always kind of, I think the show is brilliant in how it keeps it on like a line and on the edge. But in some earlier drafts, it got quite intense.
Well, you could see like moments throughout, I think, the show, but it does kind of keep people guessing because like morally and like what's going on here. And he's almost kind of teased about it by Lucy when it's like, "Oh, Pamela, like you're calling her by her
Yeah.
first name." So, yeah, but like you two did so well, I think, with that relationship and just kind of seeing where it came to that giant climax in episode 8. Now, if renewed for future seasons, what would you like to maybe explore with George or any of the other storylines?
I'd love to see how George is after going through that all of the stuff with the mirror, because I think it was really intense for him. And I don't think it'll just be normal George again. And having read the books, I think just what's in store already from what Jonathan has is so exciting if we were fortunate enough to get renewed. But as of now, I think we're all just so proud with this first series. And we're going to see how it goes, because it was such a pleasure to work on, and it's such a pleasure to watch the final product now, that anything happens now is almost a bonus.
I will throw a few ideas out there.
Go on, I really want to hear them.
Flo Bones. What do you think about that relationship between Flo and George?
I think it's definitely it's definitely flirtatious. I think George has so much admiration for Flo. He sees Flo as someone who is so much stronger than him. And probably one of the most mature actually people that he's met. We would always say actually during the shoot that Flo is probably the most mature character out of all the teenagers in the show, and maybe even all the characters.
100%. I mean, her life experiences and the way she talks about, what she's been through, and she's concerned about things beyond, ghost hunting and the problem. Haley is so excellent in her role as well.
Yeah.
And I just love their first meeting scene and how she commented on his Persian baking or cooking skills. More moments of that, maybe.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. I think it's definitely something that if we were to get renewed, that would be explored. And yeah, we'll see what happens.
Don't know how Lockwood would feel about that. It was funny watching Cameron's face, and it was like, "Oh, Lockie, where have you been hiding him?" And her, but Lockwood and Lucy is another one because I know fans will be shipping them as more than friends, and this is kind of an attraction that George has noticed throughout the season. So, what are your thoughts on that?
In terms of what? Sorry.
Lockwood and Lucy, like being more than friends, because I mean George would really be caught in the middle of that they if something romantic did happen.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I think George really thinks that they're both quite crazy. And I think he does also love both of them. So I think that if they were to end up together, I think George would just think, I don't know if this is going to work out, because you're both absolute maniacs. So yeah, I don't know. I think when they end in episode 8, I think their relationships, the three of them, are really strong. And I think George would probably be happy with that and doesn't want any more drama between the three of them. But if we were to get renewed, I'm sure that wouldn't be the case.
Definitely they would be upping the drama more so
Sure.
than George would like. But for you as an actor, I mean, it's the range and you get more experiences and opportunities. What are some of your favorite memories from behind the scenes, in particular working with Ruby and Cameron?
I just remember it's hard to pinpoint. It really is, because we had a lot of fun. And I think maybe days where we had, I don't even know. I mean, it really is hard to pinpoint, but probably just days where it'd be us three in Ealing Studios, messing about, doing stupid things, and just having fun. I mean, yeah.
Was it a lot of like you three getting to know one another, or were there just, a lot of things that you were talking about from the scripts or characters?
So I think we spent around 3 months with each other in rehearsal and sword training. Where that was like where we really got to know each other. And then when it was on set, it was just, we play a lot of Heads Up. Do you know Heads Up? Yeah,
Yeah.
we played so much Heads Up, and we just like games that were kind of like multiplayer. And yeah, we watched, I remember we watched the Harry Potters as well together. Yeah, we just kind of just did, we played a lot and messed around a lot and had a lot of fun.
I feel like you need that in between some of the heavier subject matter, right? To kind of relieve that stress. So I'm glad that, you got to work with people who you clearly get along with so well. Favorite Harry Potter character?
Favorite Harry Potter character? Oh, it's a hard one. I love Snape. I love Neville. Mrs. Weasley, maybe. I really like Mrs. Weasley. I think she's
I think you're gonna start like naming all the characters.
yeah, that's Ron, Hermione, Harry.
Yeah, the whole lot of them. As we kind of wrap things up here, what message do you have for the fans, especially those who have been waiting for an on-screen adaptation for so long? Yeah, just what do you want to say to them?
I would say that I remember when I first read the books, how much I absolutely loved them, but also how maybe anxious I was about the differences between George Karim and George Cubbins. And I just hope that fans appreciate George Karim, and I hope I've captured the essence of the books, because I know how much it means to so many fans. And I'd say that on set, I that was one of my biggest kind of objectives, to make sure I was doing that for the people who the books meant so much to.
And there's already been a lot of interest in the show on social media. I don't know if you've seen on Instagram, but you've already been tagged in some like drawn fan art.
Oh, really?
You have to go check it out.
I've got to check it out.
Yeah,
sure
there's people that are so talented, and I'm sure that you'll be getting a lot more fan art, fan edits as the show premieres. But I have one more question for you, our signature question. If you could be any ice cream flavor, which would you be and why?
Which would I be and why? God, you know what? I think that's... maybe mint chocolate chip. I really like a good mint chocolate chip ice cream. I don't know why. But
We've gotten that before, and people say I'm minty fresh, and so we accept.
Oh God, that is terrible. Sorry to whoever has said that before.
You're like gonna change your answer now.
Yeah, no. I'm gonna say like a cheesecake cherry sorbet, like a really just like pretentious flavor. But yeah.
Is this in the eye of George, maybe? Or would you say you're a little pretentious in real life?
I'm definitely pretentious. George is probably, yes, he is pretentious, but he's also really cool. And I'd say George is more like I don't know, like a caramel. I think that's quite a cool.
Yeah, something a little nutty as well. Yeah.
Okay, caramel. I don't know. What a question! You ask everyone that question. What's the best answer you think you've ever received?
Well, because of its cleverness, someone said rocky road because my life is a rocky road. I thought that
Wow,
was funny.
that's deep.
We'll take any answers. We just love to hear them. But Ali, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. Really appreciate it and cannot
Thank
wait
you.
for everyone to see this show. And of course, also your work in Bad Education. Again, for all those watching, you can catch Bad Education BBC iPlayer, BBC 3 in the UK, and Lockwood Co season 1 on Netflix. We'll see you next time.
So yeah, thank you so much.